I could accept being deceived, but I couldn't stand him speaking badly about my kind father-in-law. Fine, I said. Hand me those divorce papers. I snatched the papers from my husband, signed them quickly, and threw them back at him. All right, the rest is up to you, I told him. Yeah, leave it to me, he replied smugly. He offered to send my belongings, and I walked past him out of the living room and left the house. I knew my husband would regret divorcing me. Sure enough, he called me later, panicking when I explained that the $600 million was just a fantasy. My name is Mary. I'm 45 years old, and I work in sales. My husband, John, is also 45 and used to work in sales but now stays at home. There's a story behind him becoming a homemaker, but to explain that, I should start with my first husband. This is my second marriage. My first husband died in a work accident 5 years ago, leaving me a widow. Between life insurance and severance pay, I received about $600,000. Since my first marriage happened later in my 30s, we didn't have any children. I inherited the money along with my ex-in-laws, but they told me, we're almost 82 years old and don't have much time left, so we don't need it. I couldn't accept that and decided to give the money to my ex-brother-in-law and his wife, who were living with my ex-in-laws. However, they also said, we don't need much since it was my brother's money. You should use it. So, they only took a small portion of the money. In the end, after paying a significant amount in inheritance taxes, most of the money ended up with me. Combined with our savings and the fact that I had a job, I became fairly well off by the age of 41. But even with all that, sitting alone at home and looking at the numbers in my bank account, I felt empty. When I came home from work, no one was there, and no one ever would be. The bed beside me stayed perfectly made, just as it was before I went to sleep. The worst part was when I accidentally made breakfast for two. As I took a bite of the second piece of toast, I thought, this must be what it feels like to have a hole in your heart. I really wanted to take some time off, but I had to keep working. So, I went back to my job with this emptiness inside me, constantly feeling a sense of void. I desperately wanted someone, anyone, to listen to me, and that someone turned out to be my current husband. When I told him about my husband passing away and how I had to take some time off because of it, he said, I'm sorry for any inconvenience. I quickly replied, no, it was no inconvenience at all. Besides, your husband was a lucky man to have someone who cared for him so much. I'm sure he was very happy. He then shared a bit about himself, saying, as for me, I'm terrible at relationships. Even when I do date someone, I get dumped quickly. I know it's because of my careless personality, but it seems hard to change who you are. My husband and I were business acquaintances before we got to know each other better. I knew he was a cheerful person, so when I visited his company, I ended up telling him everything. Normally, anyone would find such a dark and heavy story off-putting, but he listened quietly and then cheered me up with some light-hearted jokes. His words and smile seemed to fill a bit of the hole in my heart. He continued to listen to my stories, and we started meeting outside of work. One day, while we were talking, I accidentally dropped a receipt, and he jokingly said, wow, my wallet is twice as thick with coins. You dropped a receipt. We both laughed. I need to organize it, but it's such a hassle, he said. When he tried to pay at a store, receipts started falling out as he pulled out some cash. I picked up the receipts and handed them back to him, and he stuffed them back into his wallet, complaining about the coins. It seemed like the receipts were also making his wallet bulky. You're like a kid, John, I teased. What? I'm 45, you know, he replied. Just as he said, he was a bit careless, but watching him, I felt the hole in my heart slowly start to close. We kept meeting privately, and a year later, he told me he had feelings for me. It had only been a year since my previous husband passed away, so I was torn, but I felt like my late husband was telling me, don't stay stuck, move forward. So, I decided to start dating John. People around us had their opinions, but making that important decision helped me begin to heal. However, just a month later, John gave me an even bigger concern and asked me to make an incredibly important decision. Shouldn't we get married? Given our age, it's better to decide sooner rather than later. This time, I couldn't hear my late husband's voice guiding me. It felt like he was telling me to trust my own intuition and keep moving forward. So, I decided to marry John. Okay, let's get married, I said, surprising even myself with how quickly I made that decision. It was likely John's personality rubbing off on me. I started to think that a bit of carelessness wasn't so bad if it made me more positive. At the same time, I learned from John that too much carelessness could be problematic. Wait, live with your dad? I asked. Yeah, just recently, he got sick and needs help with daily living. He kept working past 73, thinking he was still young, and now this happened. What about your mom? Is she helping him? Huh? Didn't I mention it? My mom's not around. My parents divorced when I was young, and I haven't seen her since. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Sorry, don't be mad, but it's a heavy topic to bring up when we weren't sure about getting married yet, right? I figured I'd tell you later. Even if you put off talking about living together, you could have told me about your parents. I would have known that living together might be an option. Well, let's not sweat the small stuff. Just meet my dad and then decide if you're okay with living together. And if I say I can't live with him? We'll figure it out then, John said with a smile, but I couldn't smile back. I wasn't planning to say I didn't want to marry him just because I didn't want to live together. I just wished he had told me the important things earlier. I thought being careless wasn't so bad, but now I see it's not a good thing after all. In the end, I agreed to meet his father as John suggested. Then, I began to understand what he meant by small stuff. Your house is pretty big, I said. Just a bit. It's just me and Dad, so we have some extra rooms. If you move in, you can use any of the spare rooms, John replied. I was about to meet his dad for the first time, so I was a little nervous. Ignoring my feelings, John opened the gate and walked towards the front door. His house was 3 stories high, slightly bigger than the neighboring houses. Living there with just the two of them seemed quite luxurious. That's what I thought, but John seemed dissatisfied. Dad's so stingy. He should have built a bigger house, he muttered to himself. But I was too nervous about meeting his dad to confirm what he said. Dad, I brought her. This is Mary, John said. Nice to meet you, I said. Sorry to greet you from bed. It's been hard to move lately, his dad replied. Please don't strain yourself, I said.